The first time my debit card failed, I laughed. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of forgettable evening that usually blurs into the next. I was standing at the checkout of the nice grocery store Ethan liked me to use when we were hosting important people. Organic berries, imported olive oil, the exact coffee beans his board chair preferred when he dropped by. "Sorry, it's saying declined," the cashier said softly, as if she'd personally offended me. I blinked at the screen. Kellar, Sayeed household checking. Declined. "Try it again," I said, smiling, because glitches happen. The people behind me shuffled their carts and pretended not to listen. She ran it again. Declined. Heat climbed the back of my neck. I slipped out my backup card, my little personal debit from an account Ethan barely remembered existed, and swiped. Approved. On the drive home, I told myself it was nothing. A fraud alert, a system outage, some boring bank explanation that would be fixed by the time I walked in the door. Ethan was the CEO after all. The man who liked to remind me, with a half smile, that he lived inside spreadsheets and balance sheets. If there was a problem, he'd already solved it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. Our condo glowed against the city like a glass aquarium, all warm light and expensive minimalism. I stepped out of the elevator into eucalyptus and lemon detergent. The smell of the housekeeper Ethan insisted on, the one I sometimes cleaned up for before she arrived, because old habits die hard. He was at the kitchen island, back to me, typing fast on his laptop. A glass of something amber sat within reach, the ice already half melted. "Hey," I called, setting the grocery bags down. "My card just declined at Mercatho. Did the bank call you?" Ethan didn't look up immediately. His fingers finished a sentence, a thought, a command, before his hands stilled. Then he closed the laptop with the careful precision he used when he was about to say something rehearsed. "Right." He turned to me, leaning his hip against the island. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that." Everything inside me went still. "About what?" I asked. "The accounts." His tone was casual, like he was talking about the weather or the grocery list. "I've restructured some things. It's just cleaner if certain cards and accesses run through me." For a moment, I didn't understand. "Cleaner how?" He sighed, as if I were making this more awkward than it needed to be. "Mara, we've talked about this. I'm taking on more at the company. There's a lot of scrutiny from investors. The board wants clearer lines between personal and business spending. It just makes sense for me to have tighter control." "So you tightened control by cutting me off?" My voice came out softer than I intended. He waved a hand. "Don't say it like that. You're not cut off. If you need something, you ask. It goes through one system. Me. No more random Amazon sprees from joint accounts. No more duplicate subscriptions we don't need. I'll take care of it." Random Amazon sprees. There it was, that tiny, neat box he'd been building around me for years, finally closing with a click. "I bought diapers and light bulbs and the software for your brand new iPad," I said quietly. "If you think that's what's sinking your investor confidence, you might want to check your burn rate somewhere else." His jaw flexed. "This is exactly the attitude I'm talking about. You don't see the bigger picture, Mara. I'm in meetings 12 hours a day making sure we survive. You're not working right now. You don't have to worry about the money. Let me do my job. You're not working right now." I looked past him, past the glass and the city, to the reflection of a woman in her mid-30s in a soft sweater and jeans, hair pulled back, groceries on the counter. To him, I was a cost center, an item in the personal expenses column he could trim for cleaner optics. "Did you remove my name from the accounts?" I asked. He shifted. "Barely." "Mara, did you?" His eyes flicked away. Legally, those accounts were always tied to my salary. My equity. It's not a big deal. You're taking this personally when it's just structure. I felt my heart thud once hard against my ribs. Of course I'm taking it personally. You made me sign those mortgage documents. You asked me to quit my job when Kellar Dynamics hit Series B so you could focus. You sat at this island and told me, "We're a team, Mara. What's mine is ours." Now my grocery card doesn't work. His expression shattered. If you're unhappy, we can revisit the budget. But I need you to trust me that this is better for both of us. Double quotes. The word landed like a lie between us. I put the berries in the fridge. I put the olive oil in the cabinet. My hands moved on autopilot. Muscle memory of all the invisible labor that kept his life smooth while he played visionary in glass boardrooms. Later, when he went back to his email, I went to the bedroom, shut the door, and opened my laptop. The bank's login page greeted me like a dare. 3 times I entered my username and password. 3 times it told me my credentials were no longer valid for that account. It took 10 minutes on hold to reach a human being. 10 minutes of listening to a cheerful recording. Thank me for being a valued customer. Mrs. Kellar, I can see that your profile has been updated, the rep finally said. Her voice was professional, unruffled. You're listed now as an authorized user on a secondary savings account, but you are no longer a joint holder on the primary checking or investment accounts. My fingers curled into the duvet. What does that mean in plain English? It means you can no longer view, move, or make decisions regarding those funds. Any requests would have to be initiated by the primary account holder. The primary account holder. My husband. I thanked her. I didn't remember hanging up. For a long time, I stared at the soft grey fabric of our bedspread, at the pattern I'd picked out while Ethan was on a business trip, because he'd said, "I trust your taste. Decorate however you want." Trust, it seemed, had been a one-way street. In the silence, the initial flare of humiliation cooled into something heavier, denser. I'd felt versions of it before. When he dismissed my ideas in front of his friends with a joke. When he forgot to introduce me at a fundraiser. When he told the story of Kellar Dynamics as if he'd written every line alone, leaving out the nights I'd sat with him on the floor, drafting pitch decks and reworking his financial model. This time, though, it didn't pass. It stayed. It sharpened. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't reach for excuses to dull it. I opened a new spreadsheet instead. The first column I titled, "What I Know." 1. Ethan removed me from our main accounts without telling me. 2. Legally, he can't erase the last 10 years of my contribution with a signature. 3. I am not, in fact, unemployed. The third line made me smile, despite everything. Ethan liked to introduce me at events as between projects or taking time to support the family. It sounded gentler than the truth. I had voluntarily stepped back from actively scaling my own company 3 years ago, after our daughter's second surgery. No one had forced me, but no one had understood what it cost either. I pulled up another tab. Citrine. The word alone steadied me. My first company, born out of a frustration I thought every woman carried alone. The invisible math of running a household and a career. I'd built a budgeting app that tied emotional tags to transactions. Resentful, proud, obligated, because money was never just numbers. 2 years ago, I'd sold a controlling stake to a mid-sized bank's innovation arm. I'd kept 30% and a seat on a quiet advisory board. Quarterly dividends still arrived in a separate account Ethan rarely asked about, because they were small potatoes compared to equity in a real tech company. Small potatoes that, when I totaled them across 8 quarters, were not as tiny as he liked to imagine. There were other entries on the spreadsheet. A convertible note I'd written in Kellar Dynamics' earliest days, back when Ethan's credit wasn't enough for their first office lease. a trust from my grandmother that my father had insisted stay in my name. Skills that didn't show up on any balance sheet. Reading a room, reading a contract, reading the man I'd married and the blind spots he carefully refused to see. By midnight, the columns had multiplied. Assets I control. Documents I need. Questions for a lawyer. I didn't rage text Ethan in the next room. I didn't storm into his office and demand an explanation. He'd already rehearsed into something that made me feel small. Instead, I turned off my laptop, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling until the lines of the spreadsheet rearranged themselves into a different equation. If Ethan wanted to treat me like a passive dependent, he had miscalculated. The quiet part of me, the part that used to stay up till 3 a.m., debugging code, that remembered every clause of our prenup by heart, had just been insulted one time too many. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. I met Annika the next afternoon at a cafe 3 blocks from the bank where Ethan liked to hold court with junior partners. She arrived in a navy suit and white sneakers. Dark hair twisted into a knot that said she didn't have time for pretense. We'd gone to law school together before I veered off into product design, and she stayed the course. Now she was one of the few family lawyers I trusted enough to text. Hypothetically, what would you do if your husband quietly removed you from all your joint accounts? Hypothetically, she said now, wrapping her hands around her coffee. I'd ask why the hell you waited until today to tell me. I exhaled a laugh, because I was busy oscillating between wanting to cry and wanting to burn down a bank. Her eyes softened. You okay? I'm awake. I stirred my tea. Which feels new. She nodded slowly. Okay. Walk me through it from the top. I did. The declined card. The bank call. Ethan as explanation about structure and control. And you. Not working right now. Annika listened without interrupting, her expression tightening only at the edges. When I finished, she opened her bag, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and flipped it open. You remember what we said after your wedding? That if I was going to sign that prenup, you wanted a copy of every single document in a folder you could access even if the world was on fire. She grinned. Exactly. Do you know what that makes me now? My least favorite person at Ethan's next board retreat. Also true, she said. But technically, it makes me the person who can remind you that your husband forgetting you are a lawyer as best friend was maybe not his brightest move. She slid a folder across the table. My name was written on the tab in her neat, decisive handwriting. Sayeed Kellar. Inside were copies of our prenup, the convertible note I'd extended to Kellar Dynamics, the trust documents from my grandmother, and a printout of my Citrine equity agreement. I traced the familiar clauses with my finger, the legalese that had once been a comfort. I remember thinking this was paranoid, I admitted. I remember thinking you were in love, Annika said gently. Those are different states of mind. I looked up. Do I have any ground here? Or did I sign myself into this corner? She took a sip of coffee, then leaned forward. Mara, listen carefully. He cannot unilaterally erase your history or your financial contribution to this marriage by changing a few account settings. The prenup protects certain premarital assets. It doesn't entitle him to treat you like a child he gives an allowance to. And that note, she tapped the convertible agreement. It means you own a piece of Kellar Dynamics that doesn't magically become his, just because he got a shiny CEO title. I blinked. We converted this years ago. 7%, right? 7%, she confirmed. Which, last time I checked their valuation, is not nothing. A number flashed in my mind, rough but solid enough to make my pulse jump. 7% of the company that paid his salary. I thought he rolled that into his shares when they restructured, I said slowly. He can't roll something that isn't his, Annika replied. He's been treating your contributions as a rounding error. Legally, they're not. I sat back, the cafe noise blurring into a soft hum. For years, I let Ethan narrate our story to other people. The self-made CEO and his supportive wife who did some app thing once. I let him decide which parts of my work counted as real and which were hobbies. But the paper in my hands didn't care about narratives. It cared about signatures. My signature. Okay, I said. Worst case scenario. Worst case is you stay exactly where you are, Annika said bluntly. Dependent on a man who's already showed you how he behaves with power. Best case. Her eyes warmed with something like mischief. Best case is you remember you're not just the CEO's wife. You're one of his earliest investors. And investors, as you know, have options. Options. The word lodged in my chest and began to glow. That night, Ethan came home late, smelling of cologne and ambition. He loosened his tie at the door and kissed my cheek absently. How was your day? He asked, already moving toward the bar cart. Informative, I said. He poured himself a drink. Mine was insane. The board is getting antsy about Horizon Group. They're threatening to pull their stake if we don't hit the next growth target. I swear, sometimes it feels like I work for them, instead of the other way around. Horizon Group. I knew the name in passing. They were Kellar Dynamics' largest outside investor. The ones who'd funded Ethan's Series B when no one else would bite. Is that why you needed to tighten control? I asked mildly. To impress Horizon. He frowned, swirling the ice in his glass. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about competence. They expect me to have my house in order. That includes our personal finances. They see everything, Mara. They look at my spending, my risk profile, my stability at home. Our stability at home. So me having access to groceries is destabilizing? I asked. Don't twist my words. His tone cooled. Look, we can argue semantics all night. Or you can trust that I'm doing what's necessary to keep this company alive. Which, incidentally, keeps a roof over our heads. I thought my grandmother's trust in my app dividends helped with the roof, I said. He waved a hand as if brushing away a fruit fly. Sure. I'm not saying you haven't contributed. But you know what I mean. The bulk of our lifestyle comes from my salary, my equity. That's just math. Math. He drained his glass and went to shower. Already done with the conversation. I stood in the kitchen, fingers resting lightly on the back of a chair, and let the quiet settle around me. If Horizon Group was putting pressure on him, that meant they were nervous. Nervous investors look for exits. Exits mean buyers. And buyers, I thought, can come in forms you don't expect. The next weeks moved in two parallel tracks. On one, I played the role Ethan had written for me. I ordered catering for his board dinners. I smiled at his colleagues' wives and nodded at their stories about Pilates and prep schools. I let him talk about his 12-hour days as if I were a mile marker on a highway he'd already passed. On the other track, I worked. I met with the head of innovation at the bank that owned Citrine's majority stake. Rayesh had always liked straight talk, so I gave it to him. I want to leverage my dividends, I said, sliding my forecasts across the table. I'm considering a special purpose vehicle, maybe a small fund, to take a strategic position in a company I understand very well. He scanned the papers, eyebrows lifting. Kellar Dynamics, he read. Isn't that your husband's company? For the moment, I said calmly. Rayesh chuckled, but his gaze sharpened. Mara, this is ambitious. You were talking about buying into a cap table already crowded with VCS and a rather notorious holding firm. Horizon Group is notorious now? I asked. He shrugged. They squeeze hard. They like control. Rumor is, they're looking to exit a few positions to clean up their books. If you really want in, that's where you'd start. But you'd need capital. Serious capital. I have some, I said. And I have something else. An angle. I know the product, the people, the blind spots. I know exactly where Ethan is overselling, and where the real value lies. An owner-operator who understands the tech and the market is a story Horizon LPs would like. Rayesh studied me for a long moment. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking, I said quietly, about what happens when smart women make themselves smaller, so someone else can feel big. I'm done with that experiment. He smiled slowly. You know, when we bought Citrine, I told my team we were lucky. Not because of the code, but because of you. You have a way of seeing the whole board. If you're serious, I'll introduce you to someone at Horizon. Off the record at first. Off the record is fine, I said. For now. The first call with Horizon was over video, which Ethan would have hated. He believed in flights and handshakes, in making people feel his presence across a mahogany table. I believed in showing up prepared, wherever the meeting took place. The man on the screen, Daniel Cho, looked tired in the way people look when they've been managing other people's money for too long. His tie was loose, his eyes sharp despite the late hour in his time zone. So, he said after pleasantries, you're the mysterious advisor behind Citrine. Rayesh speaks highly of you. I pay him to, I said lightly. He smiled. And you're interested in Kellar Dynamics? I'm interested in undervalued assets with misaligned leadership, I replied. From what I can see, Kellar has strong tech, loyal clients, and a CEO who thinks investor updates are a performance review for his ego instead of a conversation about stewardship. One of Daniel's eyebrows ticked up. You do realize you're talking about your husband? I do, I said. That's why I'm qualified. He leaned back. All right, Mrs. Kellar. What are you proposing? Call me Mara, I said. And I'm proposing we talk about your position. Horizon has, what, 38% of Kellar's Series B and C. 42, pre-dilution, he corrected automatically. So you're heavily exposed, I said. And your fund has its own targets to hit. I'm guessing Kellar Dynamics has become more of a headache than you'd like. You're not getting the execution you expected, but you don't want to write down the position yet. His silence was confirmation enough. I'd like to explore acquiring most or all of your stake, I said. Not as Ethan's wife. As a separate entity with my own capital and partners. We don't sell to family, he said immediately. Conflicts of interest, governance nightmares. That's why we won't frame it that way, I interrupted gently. You'd be selling to a new holding company with a founder who has a track record in fintech, an advisory board seat at a bank you already work with, and a clear plan for stabilizing Kellar's operations. My personal life is messy. The cap table doesn't have to be. He watched me, fingers steepled. And Ethan? Ethan, I said, will get exactly what the board thinks he deserves when they understand the full picture. My goal isn't to humiliate him. It's to protect the asset we built together. Together, Daniel repeated. Yes, I said. Together. Because for all Ethan's speeches about being self-made, there was no version of Kellar Dynamics where I didn't exist. I'd written his first financial model. I'd sat through his early pitches, correcting his jargon afterward. I'd driven to late-night meetings when he was too tired to see straight. Daniel exhaled. Send me your materials, he said. Let's see if your numbers are as sharp as your metaphors. In the evenings, Ethan's monologues about stress grew longer. Horizons on my back about churn, he'd say, loosening his tie. They don't understand that innovation takes time. They want immediate returns, instant traction. It's exhausting. I'd nod, pass him the salad, and ask small, precise questions. How often do you talk to them? Often enough. They know I have a plan. What plan? He'd outline features, campaigns, hiring sprees. None of it involved listening. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't notice the way my schedule shifted, the extra calls, the new folders on my desk. To him, my world was a soft blur at the edge of his focus. It was almost funny how easy he made it. The deal came together faster than I had expected, and slower than I wanted. There were late-night calls with Rayesh, quiet strategy sessions with Annika about how to firewall my marriage from my investment, tense negotiations with Daniel about price and structure. We built a holding company, Sayeed Strategic, clean, contained, with independent directors who owed nothing to Ethan. Through it all, I kept my voice level and my goals clear. I wasn't trying to destroy Ethan. I was refusing to let him destroy me. When Horizon finally signed the LOI to sell me 32% of their stake, keeping a small sliver for optics, I stared at my name on the document for a long time. Mara Sayeed, Managing Partner, Sayeed Strategic. 7% from my original note. 32% from Horizon. Together, a controlling interest. The woman whose card had been declined over groceries now owned the company that paid her husband's salary. The board meeting where we would make it official was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Ethan spent the week strutting. Horizon's bringing in a new partner, he told me over coffee. Some strategic investor from the banking side. This is a big deal, Mara. It's a sign they still believe in me. Did Daniel say that? I asked. He didn't have to, Ethan said, grinning. You'll see. After this, everything changes. He was right, just not the way he thought. The boardroom at Kellar Dynamics overlooked the city, all glass and steel, and carefully curated art on the walls. I'd helped pick that art once upon a time, when Ethan still wanted my opinion on more than centerpieces. Now, as I stepped out of the elevator in a black dress and simple gold earrings, the receptionist did a double take. Mrs. Kellar, she said. We weren't expecting. I'm here with Horizon's representative, I said. I'll let Daniel know I've arrived. I could feel eyes on me as I walked down the corridor. Employees at startup desks. Heads popping up like curious birds. To most of them, I was a rumor. The wife who showed up at holiday parties and disappeared into the background. Not today. Inside the boardroom, Ethan stood talking to two directors, gesturing with a confidence that had once been charming and now looked, to me, like a costume. He turned when the door opened, his smile already in place, and froze when he saw me. Mara, he said slowly, what are you doing here? Good to see you too, I replied. His eyes narrowed. This is a closed session. We're meeting with Horizon and their strategic partner, I finished. I know. I'm aware of the agenda. Before he could respond, Daniel stepped in behind me, smoothing his tie. Afternoon, everyone, he said. Apologies for the cloak and dagger. We have some significant updates today, and we wanted to make sure all the documents were final before we shared them. He moved to the head of the table, nodding for me to take the seat beside him. Ethan's gaze snapped between us. Daniel, what is this? He asked, a laugh undercutting his words. Why is my wife sitting next to you? Daniel rested his hands on the table. Because, he said calmly. As of this morning, Horizon Group has executed a sale of the majority of its stake in Kellar Dynamics to Sayeed Strategic. He clicked the remote. The screen at the end of the room lit up with a slide. Updated cap table. Horizon Group. 10% other investors. 51% Sayeed Strategic. 39%. He clicked again. Sayeed Strategic majority voting control. 46%, including founding note. A murmur rippled around the table. Ethan stared at the numbers, then at me. "What is this?" he repeated, but the laughter was gone. "Call me Mara," I said, "and I'm proposing we talk about your position. Horizon has, what? 38% of Kellar's Series B and C. 42, pre-dilution," he corrected automatically. "So you're heavily exposed," I said. "And your fund has its own targets to hit. I'm guessing Kellar Dynamics has become more of a headache than you'd like. You're not getting the execution you expected, but you don't want to write down the position yet." His silence was confirmation enough. "I'd like to explore acquiring most or all of your stake," I said. "Not as Ethan's wife. As a separate entity, with my own capital and partners." "We don't sell to family," he said immediately. "Conflicts of interest, governance nightmares. That's why we won't frame it that way," I interrupted gently. "You'd be selling to a new holding company with a founder who has a track record in fintech, an advisory board seat at a bank you already work with, and a clear plan for stabilizing Kellar's operations. My personal life is messy. The cap table doesn't have to be." He watched me, fingers steepled. "And Ethan?" "Ethan," I said, "will get exactly what the board thinks he deserves when they understand the full picture. My goal isn't to humiliate him. It's to protect the asset we built together." "Together," Daniel repeated. "Yes," I said. "Together." Because for all Ethan's speeches about being self-made, there was no version of Kellar Dynamics where I didn't exist. I'd written his first financial model. I'd sat through his early pitches, correcting his jargon afterward. I'd driven to late-night meetings when he was too tired to see straight. Daniel exhaled. "Send me your materials," he said. "Let's see if your numbers are as sharp as your metaphors." In the evenings, Ethan's monologues about stress grew longer. "Horizon's on my back about churn," he'd say, loosening his tie. "They don't understand that innovation takes time. They want immediate returns, instant traction. It's exhausting." "It's math," I said softly. "The thing you said I don't understand." One of the directors, a woman named Carla, who'd always been kind to me at events, leaned forward. "Mara, you acquired Horizon's stake." "Most of it," I said. "Through an independent vehicle, with my own capital and partners." Ethan's face flushed. "This is insane. You can't just, you blindsided me in my own boardroom." "No," I said. "I gave you 10 years of my life and more of my talent than you ever credited. You blindsided me in my own kitchen." Silence fell. I stood, feeling the weight of every gaze. My hands were steady. "When Ethan and I started Kellar Dynamics," I said, "we were in a rental with second-hand furniture and a dog that chewed through every cable in sight. I wrote the first financial model you showed Horizon. I proofread your contracts. I drained my savings and extended a note to help you make payroll twice. I did that because I believed in you and in what we were building." I let my eyes meet each board member's in turn. "Somewhere along the way, the story changed," I continued. "To the outside world, Ethan became the sole genius, the lone founder. I became an accessory. Inside our home, that narrative had consequences. 2 weeks ago, my debit card was declined at a grocery store. I found out that Ethan had quietly removed me from our joint accounts, framed it as structure, and told me I should stop taking everything so personally." Carla's mouth tightened. One of the older directors shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not here to air our marriage in front of you," I said. "I'm here because that casual erasure is part of a pattern. Ethan brings the same blind spots into this company. He treats partners as props when they're useful and obstacles when they say no. He ignores warning signs and calls it vision. Horizon has been patient. Your employees have been loyal. But you deserve leadership that understands stewardship, not just ego. Ethan slammed his palm on the table. You're twisting everything. This is a coup, not governance. She's my wife. For God's sake. You're all really going to sit here and let her stage some personal vendetta? Daniel's voice cut through the room, calm and cool. What we're going to do, he said, is follow process. Horizon didn't sell on a whim. We've been dissatisfied with performance for some time. When Ms. Sayeed approached us with a plan, capital, and a clear view of operational improvements, we listened. The fact that you share a last name is messy, yes, but not disqualifying, especially when the conflict has been created by your own choices. He nodded to Carla. As chair of the governance committee, would you like to take it from here? Carla inhaled, squared her shoulders, and opened a folder. Thank you, Daniel, she said. As per the bylaws, a change in controlling interest triggers a leadership review. With Sayeed Strategic now holding a majority voting bloc, and given Horizon's documented concerns, the board has the right to call for a vote of confidence in the current CEO. She looked at me. Ms. Sayeed, as the representative of the new majority holder, do you wish to make a recommendation? In another life, I might have faltered. I might have softened the blow, tried to protect Ethan from consequences he'd never hesitated to let fall on me. In this life, I'd done enough emotional cushioning for both of us. Yes, I said. I recommend that Ethan be transitioned out of the CEO role, effective immediately, and that an interim CEO be appointed from within your current leadership, someone who understands the product and the people. I'm prepared to work closely with that person to stabilize operations and chart a sustainable path forward. Ethan stared at me as if I were a stranger. You'd really do this, he whispered. To me? I met his gaze, feeling the ache beneath my ribs and acknowledging it without letting it decide for me. You did it first, I said quietly. You just expected me not to have any moves of my own. Carla glanced around the table. We'll now move into executive session, she said. Ethan, Mara, we'll ask you both to step out while the board discusses and votes. Daniel nodded to me. Whatever happens in there, he murmured as we stood. You've already changed the story. The hallway outside the boardroom was too bright. The kind of overlit corridor that makes everything feel both hyperreal and distant. Ethan rounded on me as soon as the door closed. You've destroyed us, he hissed. Do you understand that? The investors will never take you seriously. They'll see this for what it is. A bitter wife with a grudge. You mean a co-founder, an investor with a spine? I asked. His lip curled. We'll see how far that spine gets you when this all collapses. You don't have the stamina for this world, Mara. You never did. That's why you were happy to quit and play house. I thought of the nights I'd held our daughter while she cried in pain after surgery. The months I balanced user feedback and pediatrician. Appointments the way he kissed my forehead and called me his angel when I made it all look easy. I didn't quit, I said softly. I shifted. There's a difference. And I was never playing. He scoffed, rolling his eyes. The door opened. Carla stood there, expression composed. We're ready, she said. Back inside, the air felt heavier. Chairs scraped. Papers rustled. As per our discussion, Carla said, the board has voted. Effective immediately, Ethan Kellar will be removed from the position of Chief Executive Officer of Kellar Dynamics. We thank him for his contributions as founder and will be in touch regarding transition terms. She turned to a man at the end of the table. We are appointing Luis Martinez as interim CEO. Luis looked stunned, then resolute. He'd been the quiet backbone of the product team for years. The one person Ethan had never quite managed to steamroll. Ethan's face went blank. not composed, empty. You can't do this, he said hoarsely. Kellar is my company. It was never just yours, Carla said gently. My throat tightened, but I held my ground. This is illegal, he said, voice rising. I'll sue, Ethan, Daniel interjected. You can, of course, seek counsel, but the vote is valid. The paperwork is in order. And for what it's worth, this isn't about punishing you. It's about giving Kellar a chance to be what it could have been all along. Ethan's gaze snagged on mine. For a second, something like fear flickered there. Not of losing money, but of losing the story he'd been telling himself for a decade. I felt something inside me loosen. Not joy, not triumph. Just the quiet release that comes when you finally stop holding everyone else's weight. 2 hours later, I sat in Annika's office, the city lights a blur behind the glass. A stack of documents rested between us. The final Horizon sale agreement, the updated cap table, and a neat packet labeled petition for dissolution of marriage. Once you sign this, she said, tapping the petition, we file. Given the prenup and the changes you've made, this will be cleaner than most. Nothing about this feels clean, I said, but it feels necessary. My phone buzzed on the table for the 10th time. Ethan. I turned it over so the screen faced down. You don't have to decide anything about him tonight, Annika said. You're allowed to let this be about you for once. I looked at the pen in my hand, the ink that would turn my thoughts into something the court would recognize. Pain gives analysis, gives decision, gives action. That had always been my sequence, even when I didn't name it. Tonight the pain was old. The analysis was done. The decision had been made in pieces across a grocery store, a bank phone call, a spreadsheet, a boardroom. All that was left was the action. I signed. The scratch of the pen was small and final. Annika took the papers, her expression softening. You know, she said, I've seen a lot of endings in this office. This doesn't feel like one. I exhaled slowly. It feels like the first honest chapter, I said. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up, staring at Ethan's name. Behind it, a preview of his last message. We need to talk. Please don't do anything you can't undo. For years, I'd taken calls like that as a summons. A cue to rush back into his narrative, patch holes, soothe egos. I opened my settings instead. Blocked. The word appeared on the screen. Simple and unsentimental. I placed the phone face down and reached for the final document in front of me, the one confirming the transfer of Horizon's shares into Sayeed Strategic's account. My hand didn't shake as I signed. Outside, the city moved on. Cars streamed down wet streets. Office lights winked out one by one. Somewhere, in a boardroom I now owned, someone was erasing Ethan's name from a plaque. I gathered my bag, lit the signed documents inside, and stood. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like walking out of a building you'd designed for everyone else, and realizing, for the first time, that your name belonged on the door. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.